What I'm going to do now is just introduce you to Don Diesel. Don is the president of BlueMed. Don, which is a subsidiary of Alaska Structures. They're probably one of the biggest shelter suppliers in the world. He's going to give two presentations. The first one this morning is just from his experience, both within defence. Don was a lieutenant colonel in the US Air Force, and then as president of BlueMed, of setting up a field hospital either in a defence or civilian capacity in an austere environment. In other words, there's nothing out there and you've got to go and establish a robust first world medical facility. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Don.
So what I'm going to talk about is setting up a field hospital in an austere environment. And I'm not talking about an austere environment like Middle East desert or Southeast Asian tropics. This is the austere environment I'm talking about primarily, although, of course, the mobile hospital can go anywhere. We deploy typically after an earthquake or after a hurricane, tsunami, these types of events. And we watch CNN News, and the first thing we know, earthquake happened in this part of the world, and within a few days we're getting a customer calling us, can we support the setup and help supervise the activities that go along with the deployment. And it's, as you step into these, and most of you have probably been in these types of environments, as you step into this type of environment, it's pretty jaw-dropping. You see trees, limbs ripped from trees. I've seen tornadoes that winds were so strong they pick up the pavement and just strip the pavement right off the ground. One of the big impacts for me is to see the impact of the devastation on the victims. Of course, some of them want to chip in and help you with what you're doing. And as you start discussing the environment, the situation, sometimes you find out that they've lost loved ones, that they've lost everything they've owned, and they're in the process of regrouping, getting back to normal, trying to find their life again. And to me, that's one of the more emotional aspects of the job I do. So we see tornadoes where this is a tornado that occurred in Missouri, where it just took everything off the ground and destroyed, well, it actually killed about 160 people. Earthquakes in China, Haiti, tsunamis, and such. And as you get into this situation, one of the more critical needs, obviously, is medical care, getting that medical capability back into place. Now, I'm not talking about going in there and saving lives in the first, few minutes or hours of the event. We're talking a little bit later, trying to establish a medical support capability that's been destroyed and blown away. This is a hospital in Missouri, my home state in the United States. It's St. John's Mercy Hospital that was struck by a tornado in 2011. This tornado stripped the land from about a 14-mile strip, 1 mile wide, had 320 km/h winds, and put, of course, thousands of people out of their homes. But it also destroyed one of the greater medical capabilities within that community. Several hundred people worked here. They successfully evacuated 183 patients in less than an hour. And they only lost 5 patients, and 1 visitor to the hospital was killed as well. But now they're without a job. The community is concerned now that we don't have a place for these people to work. What are they going to do? And their biggest fear was that quite a few of them might pack up and leave, go somewhere else to begin pursuing their medical profession. So it was very important to them to, as quickly as possible, establish a new facility, get them back to work, and not just treat the community and the casualties and the medical support for that community, but also maintain that capability within Joplin, Missouri. That building there is a 9-story concrete building. Every window in the building was blown out. Like I said, it was dead center in the path of this tornado. It actually shifted the building off of its foundation. The high winds pushed it about 5 centimeters off of its foundation. This building, and now it's been demolished and they've built a new structure. But for the first few weeks, they wanted to begin operations again, receive patients, and maintain that capability there within Joplin. The only way of doing that was to bring in a hospital quickly. So what is quickly? What do we mean by fast? As I mentioned, we're not talking about the golden hour anymore. We're not talking about getting there, setting up quickly to treat the actual casualties. Those folks are being treated by first responders. If you're spending the first few minutes of that golden hour setting up a mobile hospital, chances are you're losing patients. So we're talking about longer term, several days down the line. Most of those cars were replaced back in their parking spots. They didn't get destroyed like that. They just pushed them back there with forklifts and trucks and such. But they were carried quite a ways. So, first question I often get as I'm in an environment like this and people see our facilities, our shelters, they ask, well, how quick does it go up? And I always kind of smile at, why is that important? Why is that always the first question that, not always, but most people, they say, what's the time for setting this up? And that's a natural curiosity, but it's really not that important. I mean, if it sets up in 10 minutes or 30 minutes, why is that so important? If we look at the process of deploying a field hospital, we're not talking 30 minutes, an hour, we're talking days. The activities that are involved in deploying a hospital, first activation, you have to get everybody moving. You have to get your staff recalled, of course, but also with the hospital equipment itself, first thing is you got to get all the critical items packed up. Now you say, why aren't they packed up already? Well, there's batteries that have to be on chargers, that have to be maintained on chargers. There's certain equipment and supplies that have to be refrigerated, temperature controlled. So these last minute items you pack up, it might take you an hour or two to get everything ready to go. Next, you have to deploy and transport the system to the environment where it's going to be used. So where are we going to use this? If we're going to the Philippines, of course, it's got to be loaded onto trucks, taken to the airport, loaded onto an aircraft, palletized, cargo netted, loaded on the aircraft, transported by air to the location where it's going to be used, offloaded onto a truck, and then perhaps transported by truck to the final location. So we're talking now days to maybe a week before you're actually to the site where the hospital is going to be used. We deployed a hospital after the Sichuan region earthquake in China back 2008. And this is just showing you some of the steps I just mentioned. One of the problems was they got the hospital. This was a hospital that was owned by a company or a NGO, a non-government organization named AmeriCares. Kind of a little play on words. AmeriCares provides medical support following disasters such as earthquakes throughout the world, and we maintain one of their hospitals in our warehouse, ready to go whenever they give us the call. So this hospital was loaded up, sent off to China, and within a week, which we consider to be very quick, within a week it had arrived. That's not actually China, but that was pretty representative of the roads that we had to get through. Now you can also take your equipment there by helicopter, but if you look at the footprint of a packed footprint of a mobile hospital, to get it all onto a helicopter and transport it, you're talking lots of loads. So getting it there, you have multiple different ways of transporting, but the easiest way is typically by truck or by a very large, say, Hercules aircraft to get it to where you need it. Now, once you get it there, the setup time is not just how long it takes you to set up your buildings, but also you've got to move in the equipment, you've got to set up the electrical grid. Those types of activities are also involved in the actual time it takes to establish your facility. So just saying how quickly a shelter goes up is a little bit naive. One of the important things then is, okay, if setup time's not the critical thing, what is very important about the mobile hospital? And as you start talking to the medical staff, They want a facility that is going to be safe for the patients. Now remember, you just came out of a medical facility that was destroyed by high winds. They want something that's going to be resistant to high wind loads, maybe snow, depending on the environment or location. Good temperature control, especially in the heat. These were the things that the U.S. Air Force looked at, and of course they have standard tests for all of these various different environmental performance parameters. And you have to test the facility, make sure it's capable of withstanding these things. And these in addition to being structurally sound, are very critical. Lighting. Being able to, not just the intensity of the light, but the color of the light is also important in a medical facility. The traffic flow patterns. How are we going to set up the modules to allow for the proper patient traffic flow to get people from point A to point B within the facility? These are also considerations, and it may vary depending upon the mission. Maybe your mission is for a disaster response, or maybe it's just simply to expand on an existing facility with surge expansion to enable more patient care. So we define setup then as including all of these elements. Now when you get to the setup site, hopefully it's been prepped. Hopefully site preparation has occurred simultaneous to your transport. So we get there, the site's not set up, you still have, your site's not prepared, you still have to clear the area, measure off your footprint for your site. And some of this is done by hand in a lot of situations. If you want to stage your equipment, put it in the right positions, the easiest way is with a forklift. Well, we have a lot of trouble finding a forklift in China, in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, in Mafraq, Jordan. In China, in fact, we didn't have a forklift. This was our China forklift. Basically, you get everybody together and say, okay, let's go. And you have to improvise. This is a forklift in Haiti. This is actually a forklift manufactured in Sri Lanka. That's a UN team from Sri Lanka. This is a crane in Pakistan. This is actually made out of some irrigation pipes. They were trying to offload a generator, so they built a tripod and lifted this 1-ton generator off the truck. And then in China, we finally did find a forklift. There's our reasonable facsimile of a forklift. And this is one thing you might want to consider including in your equipment package is an all-terrain forklift. Now in the United States, you can walk down the street and you can't hardly go anywhere without bumping into a forklift. They're all over the place, readily available. But when you go to some of these countries, good luck finding a forklift, not to mention an all-terrain forklift. So we actually have some customers, particularly military customers, that have included forklifts as part of their package. India, for example, we work with the Indian Air Force, and that was one of the things they wanted to include with their facility package was an all-terrain, small all-terrain 5K forklift. Very hard to find. The modular approach I also mentioned a bit earlier. Modular is nice because in your setup time, if it's going to take you, let's say, 6 hours to set up a 420 square meter facility, and you want to get operational as quickly as possible, if you set up the ER, the receiving area first, you can go ahead and start receiving patients prior to finishing the entire facility. So that's also a consideration. How are you going to set up? Are you going to wait till the whole thing is set up? Are you able to establish power to the entire facility? Or can you set it up module by module and power up each module as you go so that now you have some capability established before you finish the, let's say, the ward areas down the line. One of the other areas that we find affects the speed of setup or how long it takes us to get the system operational is the motivation of the work crew. Now, in the case of Joplin, these folks were highly motivated. Not only were this was their job, was to get their facility back up and running, but they wanted to be able to maintain a medical presence within the community. So they were highly motivated. I find military personnel are also highly motivated, or it's very easy to motivate them. There are some situations where I've seen crews brought in from outside the area that are probably less than highly motivated, but we typically see in a disaster environment that everybody is a player. Everybody wants to be part of the response. Now, there are other things like environmental temperatures, heat, stress, dehydration that affect your motivation. We just recently did a training setup in Jordan during Ramadan. And in Ramadan, they're not allowed to even consume water, much less food, throughout the day. Well, your motivation goes down quite a bit after 6 or 8 hours of no water in 40-degree heat. So we pretty much limit the workday to about 3 or 4 hours a day. We worked on a project in Sri Lanka right after the Indian Ocean tsunami. And my work crew shows up, and we're not used to drinking coconut milk. And we were being offered coconuts, right? And like, here you go. And it's, no, we'll drink bottled water. Well, bottled water ran out in about the first 2 or 3 hours. We're talking real high humidity and very high temperatures. So we're a little reluctant because I understand that coconut milk is a good laxative. But we started drinking the coconut milk, and before long, we're sucking down 10 to 12 coconuts a day. And ever since then, I've had a fondness for pina coladas. But it worked. We improvised and were able to get through the mission. There's also minor things that may be hard to come by in such an environment, austere environments, and that is just simple tools like screwdrivers, hammers. I usually, when my team goes out, we usually all carry a multi-tool, like a Gerber or a Leatherman that gives you all those basic screwdriver, pliers type functions. So it comes in pretty handy. Again, in the United States, if I want a screwdriver, I just go down the street and pick one up. But in India or Jordan, you just cannot find what you need, even if you search for it for hours, days. So St. John Mercy Hospital in Joplin, within a week, the tornado occurred on a Sunday evening. And within a week, that's the same photo we saw earlier. That's the hospital in the background with the mobile field hospital in the foreground. They were able to open operations. They celebrated, had a big ceremony, and began receiving patients. In that week's time, they set up the facility. They actually had to move the facility because it had been set up for an exercise when the tornado hit. So they had to take it down, pack it up, move it about 100 kilometers, set it up again, then start moving all of the medical equipment into it, supplies. They set up a communication system, so they're stringing wires. And in less than a week, they had it operational, and the employees did a lot of the work themselves. It's a fairly simple process to set up with a little bit of guidance, a little bit of training. And they took pride in the fact that they were able to keep their hospital functional in the face of this disaster. So with good preparedness planning and with the right equipment, they were able to make this happen.